What does it take to build a good relationship? What does it take to kind of bring people in? Whatever you're selling, if you're authentically selling it and being consultative, it's going to be okay.
Mhm.
If you feel like you're coming in like a bull in a china shop, then yeah, no one's going to like that. And no one is going to like that experience. How do you sort of ease into these conversations? And the ones who have these conversations the best raise the most money.
I love that. Thank you. Welcome to another episode of the art and science of difficult conversations. We believe that when we communicate better, we live better. And today I have my special guest, Rick, with us. Chris unfortunately dropped off. He may be watering some plants or taking care of his kids or is taking a break because they're having a snowstorm there. So unfortunately, our internet didn't work out. But we can have enough fun here, two of us. And today we're going to have conversations about how to ask for money, how to fundraise money, be it if you are in sales position, any form of situation, or a board member and you need to ask for money, how to do that, how to make it in a way that is effective and that builds the relationships rather than destroys it. So Rick, before we continue, I would love you to share a little bit about yourself and your story.
Thank you very much. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Lucy. Yeah, we're sorry that Chris isn't here, but we'll do our best. Just you and me, right? So my background is that I was a financial advisor for many years. So I helped build a business from the ground up, from talking to people about retirement planning, education planning, tax planning, and just try to
Mm.
help them reach their financial goals. So I was a sales position. I was meeting people and I did not know them, and I was trying to build trust. And literally, why I got into the whole business was try to help people understand what their options were financially. So I did that for about 7 years, but then I found an opportunity through my wife, who was working at Dartmouth College at the time, to become an associate director of gift planning. We saw some positions that were available. She said, see if you'd like to do something at Dartmouth. And I said, I don't know. What am I going to do at Dartmouth? I'm a financial advisor. I don't know what that my skill set will transfer. But when we found this position, the associate director of gift planning, it meant that I was meeting with undergraduate alums, and I would go around the country and talk about bequest intentions, charitable gift annuities, charitable remainder trusts, real estate donations, more complicated giving. But it was very soft. It was like, I had no quotas. It was just really having a nice, soft conversation about whether or not this would be of interest to them. And then I eventually moved into becoming director of gift planning at the medical school at Dartmouth. And so then I moved into talking to people who were, we'd call them dual degrees, where they had both an undergraduate degree and maybe a medical school degree. And also, I started to work at the same exact time for a hospital locally called Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center. So I was working in the academic medical center environment and talking to grateful patients and their families, while also talking to these individuals who are graduates of the medical school or the undergraduate school. Same kind of conversation. Planned giving is what we'd call it. Then I started to move into major gifts, which were $50,000 or more as an outright gift, not a future-based gift, but
Mhm.
an outright gift now. Then principal giving, which was $1 million or more outright
Wow.
for the hospital or the medical school. And then eventually I left that position, which was a great position. I had a whole team underneath me. It was fantastic. But I went toward a position called the VP for Development and Philanthropy Services at the in the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. And that was working with donors, professional advisors like CPAs, wealth advisors, trust and estates attorneys who were trying to make referrals to us. So we were trying to understand whether or not they were having the philanthropic conversation. And
Mhm.
um, and then also just, helping donors make impact in all kinds of different ways, not just in academia or healthcare, but homelessness, food scarcity, behavioral health,
Wow.
environment, whatever it is that they were interested in. And then all the way up till today, I'm about 2 years into becoming, or I am an independent philanthropy consultant, where I work with nonprofits to help them raise more money. I work with donors to help them give away money. And I work with the professional advisors, the same groups of CPAs, wealth advisors, and trust and estates attorneys, to try to make sure that they are having a substantive conversation and helping their clients, whether they are nonprofit clients or donors, do the best that they can do as far as giving money away or getting money. So that's my whole story.
I love it. Thank you. Sounds like you have a wealth of information and experience about how to share the wealth in a way for all of
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. I've had definitely a lot of conversations with people about money. And so I feel like I know things on the technical side, but I also feel like I got to know on the human side of things, relationships, personalities, and so on. And after literally thousands of conversations with people, you
Wow.
do learn some things, right?
What would you say makes it the hardest for people, for us, for our psychology to have the conversation about money?
Yeah, I think there's probably two things in society that we tend not to talk about, right? Or we try to avoid. One is politics, the other is money. And you think about it, it starts with, until recently, when you think about a job interview, you go into the
Mm.
job interview and you're talking about the job and the qualifications and your qualifications. Sometimes you never actually get to talking about the salary. And then, you'd be maybe 2 or 3 interviews in, you still don't know what the salary is. I mean, that's kind of crazy. I mean, I think that
Yeah.
now that's changing where they'll post a position and they'll put the salary range, so at least you know what you're
Yeah.
getting into. I think that's good for the employer and it's good for the person who's applying. But I think it starts with that. Like, we don't talk about money. We don't talk about how much money we make. We don't talk about how much money we have. And so it feels uncomfortable when in the world of fundraising, or like you said, any sort of sales position where you're asking someone for money, it feels uncomfortable. It feels maybe inappropriate. It's just way out of most people's comfort zones. And I totally get it. And obviously, working as a financial advisor, you're talking about things that they may not even be revealing to their kids or their parents or their friends about their own financial situation. Maybe they're even discovering it for themselves because I'm holding the mirror to them and saying, here's your cash
Oh.
flow. Here's what you have for insurance. Here's what you have for retirement. They're going, gosh, we've never looked at this stuff before. So I just don't think it's a robust conversation. So then when it comes to fundraising, for example, and you go and say, hi, I'm going to ask this person for money, it's like, I already feel uncomfortable talking about it. Now I'm going to force someone to give me money for this institution. And it feels terrible. So, I mean, I get it. I understand that. I think for me, it just comes back to positioning around, well, why am I here? What's my purpose in this conversation? Does this person starting out, do they just simply want to know about the institution? Let's start there. Maybe they just need some education about the institution. Even in selling financial products, you don't go right in and start selling anything. You start with, let me learn about you. Let me learn about what you're trying to accomplish. Let me maybe touch on a few things that might be helpful to you. But I'm not selling you anything just yet. I mean, I'm listening to you and we're talking, we're having a conversation. So I think it just starts with that sort of approach. What is your approach? How are you building trust? How are you building a relationship? And I've even heard that the best salespeople are former teachers, people who genuinely come to the table trying to help another person, help a student learn about something. And if you take that approach and you're a good teacher, chances are you'll probably be a good salesperson or maybe a good fundraising solicitor because you're listening and you care about the person that you're talking to.
Yeah, I love it. So it sounds like there's the fear and the discomfort that's getting in the way. And one of the ways, the strategies, what to do in those conversations, it's rather than sharing, well, I just need this and making it about ourselves, about our cause, really starting the conversation with more curiosity and listening and asking questions and wanting to understand.
Exactly. Is it a good fit? Even with financial services, are we a good fit? Do I even want to work with you as a client? Do you even want to work with me? I mean, maybe our personalities aren't in sync. Maybe you have different expectations than I do about what success looks like. It's very important to start there. And when it comes to soliciting money for a nonprofit organization, first of all, do they even know what your organization does as an institution? Do they feel close enough to it? They may be absolutely oblivious to what your organization does. Maybe they made one gift or they went to one event or they got a flyer or they saw a newsletter and they're kind of mildly aware of what's happening. So you're really just kind of gauging, like, A, do you want to learn about us? Or actually you start with this, what do you know about us? How do you feel about us? And do you want to learn more? And if you want to learn more, let's keep going. Let's keep talking. If you don't want to learn more, that's okay. This is a waste of your time and mine if you're just not interested beyond making a nominal gift. So it really is about understanding who you're talking to. And I think in the case of fundraising and sales, the idea is to qualify, to say, is this person that I'm sitting in front of someone who, again, either would be a good financial planning client or would be a good donor to the institution? And then you kind of move on from there. And that just, I mean, again, if done well, both parties will appreciate the fact that conversation happened. When done poorly, the assumptions are made by the person asking, like, oh yeah, you definitely want to do business with me. You definitely want to become a financial planning client of mine, or you definitely want to give to our institution. Hold on, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Let's slow down and have a chat and understand where each other's coming from. And I think when you do that on that humanistic level, the person you're talking to isn't a target. They're like they're somebody
Mm.
who has a history. They come to the
Yeah.
table with maybe a lifetime of bias against money in some ways. The person you're talking to is
Yeah.
like, I don't like to do financial planning. I haven't done financial planning because my parents never talked about money, or we grew up poor, or we grew up rich, or whatever the case may be. And like,
Yeah.
I hate to talk about it. And then with giving money to an institution, as far as donations go, same thing. It's like, I don't know how this person feels. Are they a transactional type of a donor? Do they actually want to dive in and learn more about the industry of whatever it is that you're talking about, or the topic area?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, I mean, I really think it's kind of what they say, you slow down, you go
Mm.
slow to go fast. I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
what relationship building is all about.
I love it. So I'm hearing really slowing down and being curious who the other person is. What would work for them? What do they need? What do they want? What do they care about? And then
Yes.
matching them at step by step. Are we still match? Are we still a match? In a way, checking during that conversation. At what point do you transition to making that ask?
I'd say it's at the end. And I'm sure there's probably been an analogy more than once around dating. When you think about dating someone, if you ask them to marry you on the first date, they're going to think you're really strange. And probably it could go south pretty fast. Although I did hear a story about a president, I don't remember who it was, one of the presidents of the United States, who literally asked his future wife to marry him on the first date. And she thought
Wow.
he was crazy. But anyway, it obviously worked out. They got married, but that's
Good for them.
unusual. Yeah, good
Yes.
for them. But I think that's unusual. But I'd say that it's all about readiness. And as
Mm.
we're talking, I'm thinking about this visual. There's this group called Advancement Resources that works with hospitals, and they try to help the doctors and nurses and administrators and researchers be better at making a referral to the development office. So they're saying, like, doctors and nurses and others come with biases. They're sort of poor at making a referral because they have their own hangups and obstacles. So
Makes
Advancement
sense.
Resources comes to the table and says, how do you make an ethical referral to the development office? How do you help the doctor or nurse have a conversation outside of the clinic so that people don't conflate their care with whether or not they make a donation to cardiology or
Yeah.
whatever the case may be? But anyway, Advancement Resources has this terrific chart, and it literally is all these stages of readiness, starting on the far left with ignorance, saying, I don't know about this institution. I don't know who you are. I've never heard of it. I'm barely aware. All the way to the far right, which is, I love this institution. My family loves this institution. I go to every
Mm.
event. I read the newsletter front to back. I give lots of money to this institution. I give a lot of my time to the institution. I've served on the board. They're in my will.
Wow.
I will, take a bullet for this institution. Like that's how
Yeah.
much in
Wow.
love they are with the institution. And then you have everything in between. So imagine what it would look like to go from ignorance to I'm in love with the institution. It takes many steps to get there. Takes many years to get there. A lot of trust building, a lot of engagement. So it's very unrealistic to think that an individual who has, say, $100 million would give even $1 million to an institution without going through some sort of a trust building exercise to get there over many, many years, to the point where the family, the individuals, they feel like, I can't say enough about this institution. I'm just so enamored with it. And that same goes back to the dating analogy. I mean, by the time you're asking someone to marry you, you should probably feel really good about that person and feel like they'd be a great life partner to you. If you have reservations, then maybe something's wrong, it's not a good fit, and so on. And quite honestly, when you do get married, and you've been with them for a while, it should get better and better in theory. It should become richer and deeper, more trust.
Hmm.
Hopefully you're a fantastic couple because you respect each other as individuals, and you're working together as a unit, to better the environment around you, to help your kids, to help your family. Like you're really on the same page as far as your goals and aspirations. So there's a lot of,
Love it.
good analogies between dating and getting married and
Yeah,
building relationships as it relates to money, because it's so much around trust.
that's true. We could have just another episode about conversations around money within the relationship. and for couples? How do they talk about money? Because that could be one of the causes for lots of disputes and disharmony in relationship.
For sure. I think the number one reason people either get divorced or break up is because of money. And I'll have to say, one of the things that used to, I don't know, make me laugh or make me concerned, I'm not sure which one, but when I would be sitting in front of a couple who is, I'm coaching them about money and we're having a good conversation, I was always surprised when one would turn to the other and go, I didn't know that. I wasn't really, when did that happen? I didn't know we had that money over here, and they're talking to each other and I'm just sitting there watching going, oh boy, I'm not sure if this is good or bad that we're having this conversation right now. But, or one thing I would really get a kick out of, actually it made me upset, was sometimes, and this is more of a guy thing, I think sometimes, the man would turn to the wife and start explaining about something. This is how a Roth IRA works, or this is how charitable gift annuities work. And I'd sit there and I'd be like, well, what do you need me for? I mean, it sounds like you know. But I think it was more of the man just trying to justify, like, I know we haven't talked about this yet, honey, but you know what? Let's talk about it right now. I do know a little something about it, just enough to be dangerous. So anyway, I just thought those were kind of interesting things to watch right in front of me to think, okay, well, maybe I'll just go get a glass of water or something and you can finish this explanation.
That's a good one. Now, we will have you for another episode just focusing on those, because I think that could be really helpful and rich and partially fun too.
Right.
But when we go back here to in a professional setting, how do you build a trust?
I think you're building trust because you are, again, I think it comes down to respect. Building trust because it's like, say it's you and me and I'm meeting you for the first time. If I'm trying to build a relationship with you, I genuinely am trying to get to know you. And hopefully you're trying to get to know me in the sense of, at the very least, that I am somebody you can trust to help you. So it's really just getting down to asking about goals, asking about your family, asking about your past, asking about your present, asking about what your future might look like. It's the soft stuff and it's the hard stuff. It's the what's the name of your cat, as well as what makes you worried about money, or why do you think you wouldn't get to retirement, or why are we meeting here today? Like what are you hoping to get out of our relationship? How do you hope that I could be of service to you? I think that trust is at the core of it. And it's also, I think, good interviewing skills. I think you have to know what it is that you're doing and what it is that you need from someone so you're not wasting their time. I read a book also that I highly recommend called The Speed of Trust. It's Stephen Covey's son, Stephen Covey of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the things that was talked about is you can build a great relationship with somebody, but one key thing that I took away from that book was competency. In other words, you and I may have a great relationship, but you may not move forward for one reason, and that's because you don't think I know what I'm talking about. You don't think that I'm competent in my field. I'm not a CFP. I'm not a whatever it is. Like there's something about my skill set that you question. You may not be overt about it. You may be polite about it, but you may be like, well, I don't know. We'll go home and talk about it. It's because you like everything else about me, but you don't think that I have a strong background. So anyway, there's multiple points in the book that they talk about. Basically, it's almost like check boxes. You will move more quickly toward a strong relationship if you do these things, which are, competency, listening, and basically showing someone that they can trust you. and what does trust look like? And I think it can happen quickly, or it can happen, somebody could really shut down. It could be something about the way you said something, or the way you're standing, or the way you're talking. The tone of your voice may turn me off. I think we all make kind of quick judgments when we're going into situations, right or wrong, about whether or not I can trust someone. And sometimes we're right and sometimes we're wrong. But I think when it comes to big decisions like giving money away, especially when you don't have to, or planning for retirement, or planning for your kids' education, or getting insurance, or whatever, you want to definitely know the person you're talking to is someone who has your best interests in mind, is a good fiduciary, or is just a strong advocate for what's right, and has good morals and integrity, and is going to be someone you're proud to be working with. And I think really importantly, someone you would recommend to other people. I've seen situations where a financial advisor will sit down in front of someone, the couple or the individual has not hired that person yet, and then the advisor will say, has this been valuable today? and they'll get an answer. And if the answer is yes, say, are there others that you know who might be interested in talking with me and getting the same type of value? And the couple or the individual will either say, I can't think of anyone, or yes, I will tell you, you should talk to my coworker, you should talk to my friend, and you should talk to my sister, or whoever it is. I've trust you enough, even in this first meeting, that I feel like
Nice.
there's been enough value that I would offer a free consultation to, or I would suggest that to a friend or a colleague or a sibling, because I've gotten enough value out of this conversation that I think they should too, even if they haven't done any transaction yet. Just that 1 hour, 1.5 hour, 2 hour discussion of trust building essentially was worth it. So I just think those are the things that I've learned along the way, is you're just kind of taking the time to show that you care and that you want to genuinely help someone else. And that was a compliment that was given to me just actually today. This guy said, Rick genuinely cares about his clients and his customers, which is true.
Nice.
So I think when people can feel that about you and then they see you in action, that you show up and you do what you say you're going to do, you follow up and you show that you're in the game, I think people genuinely want to stay with you. They get excited, they get inspired by working with you. And so that's what I hope to bring to the table every time I'm working with people.
I love that. And I'm also hearing there are two segments of trust. One is, can I trust them that they care? Do they care? And there's another one, do they have the skills? Do they have the expertise to help me do the job?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you go in and trust someone because you like them, but then they don't follow through on the competency, then you'll be disappointed. If they are very competent, but then they don't seem to care or follow up with you, then you'll be like, oh, I think I was, sold a bill of goods here, and so and some of it you do need to wait and find out. Like someone may present really well. A good example is a job interview. Someone can present extremely well on paper and in person, but then then you say you check their references and the references are like, no, they're not that good. They're like, don't bother. I'm not sure that anyone would put references down that would say bad things about them, but let's just say they did, or they have reservations, or there's something about when you're checking the reference, they go, yeah, well, here are the person's limitations. Then all of a sudden you go, okay, well, this person who I'm talking to knows this other person really well, and they have reservations. So yeah, I think it's a combination of those two things. And then, another joke that came about, this guy just emailed me yesterday, and he said, Rick, remember when we first met? He said it was like that part in the movie Step Brothers. The Step Brothers hate each other at first, but then all of a sudden they go, hey, did we just become best friends? And so he said that to me in the email. He goes, I feel like we became best friends right away. And so, I thought that was funny.
Nice. Well, it shows about really walking the talk and having so many conversations. You really develop the skills of building the trust, building the relationship. And I also see that it's genuine, that you do care, that you do want to help also through the work that you do, which is really supporting the good cause.
Right. And I'd also say this another thing, Lucie. I'd say it's also a bit of a long view that that I would have, for example, and maybe this goes back to competency, but I would think like I want to help someone visualize what retirement looks like. I want to help them visualize what getting their kids educated looks like. I want to help them visualize what would happen if they died and their life insurance benefit came through, and how would that take care of their family or not take care of their family. If they got disabled, what would that look like? If they went into long-term care, what would that look like? Just kind of help them visualize that long view so that you could say with integrity, I really helped this person because I know that if they were in that situation, they would be as well covered as they could be under the circumstances. They would be appropriately prepared. And the same with fundraising. It's like, imagine what it would look like for you to give X number of dollars, but what would the stewardship look like for you as an individual? What do you want your name on the building? Do you want to meet the president of the institution? Do you want to meet the staff members? Do you want a tour? Do you want to just stay close with conversations over the phone? So that's what I mean about the long view, is you're already imagining them being successful as in the financial planning realm or being successful in the donation realm. Like you're giving them what they're hoping for, and you're already painting the picture of what that looks like. And then importantly, you're delivering on that. It's again, it's one thing to sell someone on the idea of something. It's quite another to deliver on it. And when you show that you are helping to deliver on it, or you're conceptualizing something, they can see you're moving toward it. I think that's a very powerful thing. And so that
Yeah.
long view, that sort of like I'm beginning with the end in mind. Again, going back to Stephen Covey, beginning with
Hmm.
the end in mind is
Yeah.
important. And when people can see that you have that vision of what that looks like, or you're doing it together, I
Hmm.
think that's about as powerful as it can be.
I love that. And you shared creating the positive vision. What would you love? Kind of how would you want to be treated and acknowledged also back? At the beginning, before we went live on our podcast, we touched on a little bit preparedness for disasters. We talked a little bit about the
Mm.
fires in the LA area that we just had. Today, I had a client where she was saying her dad is in his 80s and he just got injured really badly, and they're starting having the conversations about the future. And her relative said, maybe we should have a conversation also around the money. And she said, I'm not ready to even have this conversation right now. What about visualizing? Because that could be difficult, even visualizing the disaster, be it kind of disaster like the fires or our own personal disasters, somebody passes away. How do you prepare for those conversations? What would make them easier for
I
family
think
members, even just to start the conversation?
I think it comes down to what we were talking about before.
Mm.
Excuse me, recognizing that these are hard conversations, period. Because if you're not
Mm.
recognizing that, you're not starting there, it's like you're tone deaf. So it's starting with the fact that you recognize that this is hard. However, then it's important to go into it and say, all right, let's talk about the fact that a parent, for example, is becoming less capable. They're losing their abilities. This was your father who dominated your household 50 years ago, and now you're taking care of your father. Like, that's hard. It's hard for him. It's hard for the father to be like, I can't move the way I used to. I don't have the mental capacity that I used to. I can't go up and down stairs or whatever the case may be. Like I'm going to be I'm now going to be living in a home, or I'm going to be, this is embarrassing for me. I don't like it. So recognizing that, and then recognizing the fact that again, the child also has to kind of move into those conversations. But the hardest part also I'd say is preparedness to say we are all probably going to become more feeble mentally or physically. There are things people can do to plan accordingly, financially, logistically. Now there are some people that resist at all costs. Like I'm going to stay in my own home for the rest of my life, and you can't stop me, and anyone who tries to move me is, betraying me or whatever the case may be. But I think that just comes down to let's back up. Let's tell stories. Let's talk about how so and so resisted going into an independent living facility or an assisted living facility, but then they realized later that it actually was better for them. They actually did need to go there. They weren't capable of living in their house anymore. It's just,
Mm.
but that's
Yeah.
that those are soft conversations, a lot of almost like testing the water.
It's a gentle
It's
approach.
it's very gentle. Yeah, you wouldn't want to come
Yeah.
on strong. Like I know,
To decide now.
next week we're moving into the new assisted living facility. I mean, they talk about jarring. So, but I think that, yeah, I think a lot of things are with difficult conversations. It's about saying, let's prepare. Even when you mentioned disaster relief, we were talking before we recorded here is that to prepare for disasters, what does that look like? To imagine that something might happen, no matter what it is. Could be a flood, could be a fire, could be a shooting. You want to say, like, what would we do to prepare? What would it look like to have first responders come in, or community organizers and so on? And, so that's on a community level. You need to be having those discussions. But at a
Yeah.
personal level, like you were saying, preparing for retirement, preparing for death, preparing for whatever. It's like saying, this is not new. This is an almost universal set of goals that people have, and
Mhm.
let's talk about that. And if we can do something to plan for it, let's do it. And if there's nothing we can do, well, at least we looked at it to the best of our abilities and we tried to get through it. And to me, that just goes back to that humanistic piece as well, is to say, I might be your financial advisor or I might be your fundraising representative, but I'm a person too. Like I get it. I understand. And if I don't get it, I might know someone who does, or I might have learned how to deal with these situations through my capacity and my abilities to just take on training myself to deal in such situations. So I guess at the end of the day, it just comes down to the fact that we're kind of all in this together, right?
Makes sense. So in a way, it's not really about exactly the sentence, what I'm going to say and practicing those. That could be too, also looking at the process, but also about how we show up for the conversation. Are we
Mm.
showing up from the fear or judgment, or are we showing up with the curiosity and the care for the other? and empathy,
Yes,
what I heard. Like this is human experience. All of us are going through those. And yes, it is
that's right.
hard for all of us. Having more compassion for ourselves when we have these conversations, sounds like, which
That's
you're
right.
naturally already doing.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I mean, we all have needs, like
Mhm.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like we all come to the table with, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I need to sleep, I need to go to the bathroom, whatever I need to do.
Yeah.
And then recognizing other people need the same thing, and then you kind of go
Yeah.
up the ladder all the way to what I'd say at the top is fulfillment, right? What does it look like to
Mhm.
have someone be fulfilled personally and emotionally and spiritually? To go there, like what does that look like to get there? That's a great. I mean, if people can reach that point in time in their lives, how powerful is that, right? So, but yeah, I mean, one of the things my kids have said to me, and I really appreciated this, is I think when they were growing up or they'd complain about something or complain about a person, I kind of step back with them and say, well, we don't know what that person's going through. We don't know what their history is. We don't know what their family life's like. This kid at school who might want to feel like he wants to beat you up all the time. You don't know what kind of a home life he has. He could be a jerk, or he could be somebody who's just dealing with a lot of trauma at home, and we don't know what that is. So it's kind of like you approach somebody with kindness and say, let's assume that we're trying to get along. Let's assume that we're trying to at least understand each other, and that's hard. Like we all have situations where we don't necessarily approach things that quickly, like, hey, let's get to know each other, let's be kind to each other. But I think that helped my boys approach situations where they would kind of stop before judging. They would stop and go,
I love
let's
it.
just come in and just assume that the other person has the best intentions, but they might be having a bad day, or they might be having a bad week, or maybe they're dealing with like enormous burdens in all kinds of ways. So could you hold the door for them? Could you ask them if they need some help? Is there something you could do to make their day easier? If we can all do that, I think we show up and are helpful to the human race. If we show up like, kind of that jerk, he did, and if you spend your whole life kind of talking and acting that way, I'm not sure that's helpful for you as an individual. I'm not sure if it's helpful for society.
Agreed. So it could be a positive ripple effect in a way, giving compassion for the other, building the trust, building the positive assets in a way of our relationships.
Right, exactly. And I'm thinking of a commercial. I'm not sure what the commercial was for, but it was a commercial where one person did a good deed to somebody, and then that second person does a good deed to somebody else, and it shows a
Oh,
ripple
yeah.
effect of positive deeds through
Mhm.
the whole commercial at about
Hmm.
6 or 7 times. And it was kind of like, hey, life could really actually be
Yes,
like that. I held
true.
I held the door for this person, and then they walked an old lady across the street, and then somebody made a donation into a Salvation Army kettle, and then somebody whatever. It just keeps on going and
Yes,
going.
yes. Yeah.
And I'm sure the opposite's also true. Like, it's like the kick the dog mentality where,
Oh.
my boss yelled at me and then I go and yell at my kid and then the kid goes and kicks the dog. Anyway, I just feel like there's opportunities if we want to make them every day where we can
Mhm.
show up and make life a little easier for somebody else.
I love that. So be mindful about what kind of ripple we are following.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Are we initiating a positive ripple or are we initiating a negative ripple?
The negative one. I
Yeah.
love that. Now, Rick, if somebody just joined our podcast now, let's say Chris, his internet comes back, he would join us. What would you say to those listeners? What was the key takeaway from our conversation?
The takeaway is be intentional in your life. Who are you? How do you want to show up? Who do you want to be? What do you want your legacy to be? And have that translate into the conversations that you have, including the potentially difficult conversations that you think you might have, because it will give you the power and the courage, I think, to have those conversations. If you come in with conviction of like, we're going to figure this out together, we're going to solve this problem together, then I think you show up and are more brave. And when you don't have that kind of conviction or you're not showing up to that kind of intentionality, maybe you let yourself off the hook or you don't go there or whatever the case may be. But I guess maybe just part of my life is I just try to show up and say, how can I be a positive force? How can I be somebody that people look back on and say, Rick really helped me. I really appreciate that. He took the time to talk with me, to guide me. And honestly, in some situations, there's nothing in it for him. He didn't get anything out of that other than to help me. It's kind of like the good karma thing, right? And sometimes I am getting paid for it. I'm getting paid as a consultant or as a financial advisor to help somebody. Okay. I still show up the same way, actually. I still show up in the same way of how can I be a positive force in this person's life or this couple's life or this family's life? So that's what I'd say. If Chris were showing up right now, I'd say, the difficult conversations we have, I think you start to learn how to make them less difficult by making it feel like you want to have a win on both sides, whatever that may be, whatever that looks like.
I love that. Beautiful. When somebody wants to start that positive ripple effect and wants to be the person that creates the change and they would love your support, how they can reach you.
Well, thank you. So I have a website. So my funny little nickname is the Philanthropy Guy. So it's the Philanthropy Guy at gmail.com is my email address, or thephilanthropyguy.com is my website. And you can go on the website, you can subscribe. I have a biweekly newsletter that I put out. I have a biweekly podcast of my own, actually, that I put out called Money to Give. And so those are different ways people can plug in if they'd like to. And you can also reach me, call my cell, or text me 603-387-3897. Text me or call me and we can get in touch that way as well.
Wow, Rick, you've been amazing. Thank you for your flexibility with our tech difficulties. Thank you for being a guest on our podcast and giving lots of pieces of wisdom here and really building the trust and showing how do we build trust? How do we create those positive ripples? How do we connect better?
Thank you.
And thank you. Really appreciate you. It's been a joy to have you here.
Thank you, Lucie. Hey, did we just become best friends?
Totally.